All right, I'm joined by the Des Linden of the pod, Alex Sear.
Nice.
And the Meb Kiflevsky of the podcast, living legend, Katelyn Tossey. And I am your Lazarus Lake, Michael Doyle. What do these three people have in common, you guys? Does anybody know?
They are all. No, I have nothing. They're into running, but other than that,
Right.
I think they are three very different people.
I would just say they're all involved in running in some way or another. But there has to be something more than that.
And we have something now in common with them, which is we are all going to be at the Boston Run Show, March 1st to 2nd, 2025.
Yes.
This is exciting news, guys. We're getting the power trio, the three of us, back together again, live and in person. We've been cordially invited to join the Boston Run Show as, I guess, guest speakers or guest podcasters. We're going to do, the three of us, we're going to get together in Boston. We're going to do a live podcast from the stage of the Boston Run Show, March 1st. I think we're on Saturday mid-morning, I believe. I forget what the exact time slot is now. I think it's like 10:30 or something like that. But Des Linden, Meb Kiflevsky, Lazarus Lake, David McGilvery, the famed longtime race director of the Boston Marathon, and many more are going to be at this event doing talks, keynote talks, fireside chats. And in our case, we're going to do a live podcast. So you're going to get to hear us live from the Boston Run Show shortly after we do that show on March 1st. And this is an event that's open to the public. So if you live in the Boston area, Katelyn, you're from Boston, so friends and family can show up.
I hope so.
Yeah, you can buy a ticket. You can walk around. It's basically, the concept is like, it's basically like a really cool, like the best version of a running, like a marathon expo with all kinds of neat gear and stuff, and events and speakers and experiences without the pressure of the race. So it's the Boston Marathon minus the having to run the Boston Marathon. It's perhaps the comp there. So it's March 1st and 2nd. Again, it's open to the public. So if you're looking for an interesting little weekend, a little runner's escape, come to Boston in March. Come see us speak. And we're going to do the pod from there. I think we're going to figure something else out as well. While we're together and we're in Boston, we'll figure something else out. And maybe we'll include our audience. Give us a shout if you're going to be in Boston or thinking about it. You can email us at hi@marathonhandbook.com or DM us on any of our social media, or you can leave a comment on our YouTube channel because we post a video version of this podcast, or through Spotify. They do comments for the podcast as well. We'll keep an eye on those. We'll scan those and we'll fold you in. We'll let you know. And we'll do some announcements like probably in February leading up to it. If we've got something planned, we'll put it all together. The Boston Run Show, check it out if you're looking for a neat little weekend adventure as a runner without that pressure of running a race. All right, guys. So today we've got everything you need to know about running through the winter. You've got three hardened veterans of the winter.
Yep.
Bostonian Katelyn Tossey. Although, wait a minute, you live in Costa Rica now, but you can hearken back.
Mm-hmm. I remember those bone freezing days. Don't worry.
And then Alex Sear and I are Canadian. So we basically just run in the snow 11 months of the year. So we're going to get into every little detail from like what you should wear, how you should figure out what to wear. When is it too cold to run? Is there such a thing? And so on and so forth. We're going to get into that. But first, guys, I noticed that the Boston Marathon, segue from the Boston Run Show, the Boston Marathon announced this in the last few days that they have released the 2025 129th Boston Marathon. It used to be called the finisher's jacket. Now it's called the celebration jacket. Katelyn, this is your jacket. This is it. Katelyn's running Boston this year. So we'll put a link to our story on the site about the jacket with all the different photos of the jacket and some of the sort of social media reaction is about the jacket. And I think we're also going to put together a story that like power ranks best to worst jackets over the years. The Boston Marathon's been Adidas has been doing the jacket for I think it's about almost 30 years, I believe. I forget what the very first official Boston Marathon jacket was, what date. But it's been a very long time. So this jacket, first impressions. Katelyn, you go first. Are you buying one? $120.
You know, if it had been, I saw the jacket. I just saw the photos of the jacket. And I'm not sure. I will absolutely buy something Boston. There's no way I'm going to go run the Boston Marathon, my hometown, and I'm not going to have something from that year of the Boston Marathon. But I have heard that at the expos, they have a lot of other memorabilia that I may enjoy. So perhaps if I find something that I like better than the jacket, because the jacket, I perhaps wouldn't get to use it that much in Costa Rica. Like there's very far and few between where I would say I would go out and use a jacket. And if I ran the Boston Marathon, I want to sport my swag from the Boston Marathon. So maybe if they have a really nice, long sleeve t-shirt with a cool design or something. So I will be coming out of Boston with something, but I don't know if it will specifically be this jacket, as it also seems like the kind of those, yellow and blue, bright yellow and blue has kind of been morphed to a bit of a different blue, right? What do you guys think about that?
It's a new take on the Boston blue is what they called it.
Yeah.
Which to me looks like purple.
It's very purple-esque, isn't it?
Purpley.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But I kind of respect it. It's probably hard for the organizers now to come up with a jacket that doesn't quite look like all the other ones. So when we were in Boston, we did this little fun reel where we tried to find one person at the expo for each year from the last, I think we did a decade, right? The last decade.
I think we got even more than that. Yeah. We were
it
like
ended
hunting.
Up being more. Yeah, we found like 2003. We found 2000. All old Boston Marathon jackets, and we were pretty successful. People just sport these things around. It's getting to the point where I don't think there are many colorways left. I recall there has been a deeper purple in the past. Oh. There's obviously been a lot of blue incorporated, given that the yellow and blue are the official colors of the BAA, I suppose. So this is different. What do you guys think of the signage on the sleeve? It's on the jacket. There's like a little phrase. It says, "Boston is my victory."
I mean, I think that's a nice sentiment. I think it's nice that there's little that's not an Easter egg necessarily, but little kind of, little fine touches. I'm of two minds about that slogan. Boston is my victory. I still believe when you're coming to the Boston Marathon, you're a goal-oriented person. You're probably a pretty time-focused person as well. You had to qualify. I think Boston shouldn't be the victory. I think the start line shouldn't be the victory. I think the finish lines should still be the victory. So I that's where I'm kind of a little like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing there, but I don't know.
Like Katelyn, is Boston your victory right now, or is Boston your challenge?
Yeah.
It's your challenge.
Yeah, Boston's my challenge. I think if the finish line is implied, then the phrase makes a lot of sense. Like if I actually kind of read it like that, like Boston is my victory. If I finish, it's going to be my victory. So I think the finish line there for me was maybe a bit more implied, but maybe I was reading it wrong.
Maybe they should add "if I finish"
if I finish.
Like in parentheses, if I get to the finish line. Yeah. And they've also got two different kind of like looks. They've got this kind of like purpley blue on what looks like a kind of light, almost gray lavender. Am I reading that correctly? Kind of like an off-white almost. And then they got the inverse look as well. I think I like the one with the darker purpley blue more present.
Me too. Two. Yeah, I like that the second one you mentioned, the inverse one, the one that's more purple. That looks really nice.
Yeah. I mean, the Boston Marathon jacket, I imagine a very interesting design challenge for the good folks at Adidas every year, because they kind of have to it's this like ebb and flow. They like stray away as much as they can, and then they bring it right back. So like I'd say it feels like every 5 to 7 years they'll come out with a jacket that's really like, blue and maize yellow, like just very traditional looking. And then they'll start kind of like wandering away. And this is definitely like they've wandered halfway away at this point. I don't know. It's pretty sharp. It's like it's very, it's subdued. It's not wild or overly loud or colorful. It sort of fits with the Boston Marathon brand, right? So, and they sell these things like friggin' hotcakes, guys. Like as Alex says, you have witnessed yourself with your own eyes. People like ransack the Marathon Expo for these things, even though you can order them online in advance. But okay, yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes to our story on that, and as well, if we end up, I think we're going to end up doing that. Like we're going to try to power rank as many of these Boston Marathon jackets over the years. I'm actually really curious as to what would be the greatest example of the Boston Marathon jacket. I think the standard bearer might be, I guess 2013 was the most like iconic Boston Marathon jacket, if I remember correctly.
I also think 2000, I want to say 2 or 3, where it was blue with the maize yellow logo, and it was like very, very classic. I think I was in college when it was that. I remember that jacket very specifically, and it was that bright royal blue and the maize yellow. So that might also be a really classic year. 2003, I think.
And that very year, Alex was wearing a little Boston Marathon onesie for an infant, right? So,
yes. Yeah.
A little unicorn onesie.
I was wearing something yellow and blue, but I think it was either Caillou or Babar.
That's good. It's Caillou. I forgot about Caillou. Is Caillou still around? I have a 6-year-old. I don't know.
I think he's been canceled. I'm not sure why.
Caillou's been canceled?
We'll have to look into this.
What did Caillou do?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to make any cancellation jokes about a beloved childhood cartoon character. All right, guys. First topic of the day. Nike. Lots of big changes coming in 2025. We were in Austin. We've talked about this on previous podcasts, where we were at the running event, got to see everyone's shoes for 2025 upcoming. And Alex, I think one of the more intriguing developments in Austin that was almost like breaking news worthy was this sort of off the cuff thing from the Nike reps when they're like, oh yeah, by the way, we're totally getting rid of a bunch of models and we're completely changing how we're doing things. I went and made a video for our YouTube channel about it because I thought it was so fascinating. But let's break it down. So like you're standing there, you're chatting with the product rep at Nike, and she's walking you through what they got coming in 2025. And she says, what?
To my initial question that was like, what do you got in the racing docket this year? Any new racing shoes? She went on to tell me about what was the main topic on the Nike agenda, which was totally different. Training shoes. They nixed 2 important training shoes, at least in my books. The Invincible and the Infinity was nowhere to be seen. But what they ended up doing was making 3 pillars out of the names of the shoes that we know. So 3 pillars. You had structure, you had Pegasus, which is the flagship trainer, and then you had Vomero, which is maybe a souped up version of the Pegasus, slightly bigger. And then under those 3 pillars, under each of those 3 pillars, I'm confusing myself saying this, are 3 different pillars. So in each of them, so for example, under the Pegasus pillar, there is the Pegasus, then there would be the Plus, and then the Plus has a little bit more foam and cushioning to it, and then the Premium, which has the best material out of the 3 and would be considered a workout shoe. And so we're talking 3 types of Pegasus, 3 types of Vomero, and 3 types of structure shoes. And that's it, right? So, like I said, no invincible line continuing, no infinity line. That is all they have, or all they're going to have inside of the training shoe category.
I think this makes a lot of sense for them, because I feel like, and I'm a Nike guy. I've run Nike shoes. I've run in the pegs. I've run in a million pairs of pegs over the years. The pegs work for me. They don't work for everybody. And other shoes that they make have just been weird, right? Like, do either of you run in Nikes? Katelyn, do you ever run in Nike?
You know, I hadn't. I had never run in Nikes until I ran my most recent marathon in the Vaporflies, which I loved. And the problem was that over the years, I mean, I always wanted to run in Nikes because Nike always has the coolest looking shoes. They've got
Right.
the colors, they've got the designs, and I have been like electrically attracted to these shoes. Like, I want those, I want those, I want those. So I'm in the store and I'm checking them out and I'm putting them on. And when I've put them on, they just haven't felt quite right. They haven't been comfortable enough for me to say. And, you know, that's rule number one. You're trying a pair of shoes, they have to be comfortable. If they're not immediately comfortable, they're not the shoe for you. So I've never taken home that pair to really be able to try them out. And so I'm excited for this new idea, for these new lines, for this new Nike of 2025, because I've always wanted to be able to train in the shoes. And I hope that now I'm going to find my perfect Nike shoe.
Now, Nike, of course, never, like, they don't release hard numbers, I don't think, on how many units they sell with each model every year. But I've always felt like everyone knows the Pegasus. It's the oldest continuous running shoe model out there. It's 40, I think it's 42 iterations coming up. So it's been around it is as old as Katelyn and I, and twice the age of Alex Sear or something. But the Vomero is a bit of a mystifying shoe, I think, for a lot of people. And the structure is as it sounds. It's very on the nose. It's a support. It's sort of more of a fully supportive shoe for pronation, right? Interesting move that they made. So a little insight into this. I went down the rabbit hole. I was like, okay, Nike's making some big changes. They're getting rid of shoes. They're creating these pillars, and then pillars within the three pillars with three verticals for each pillar, you know, not to complicate things further. Like, why are they doing this? And then all you need to do is look at their sales figures and their stock price, and they're just getting pounded by everybody else. Brooks way outselling them in the run category for like hardcore running shoes. I think even Asics and New Balance are ahead of them. So they're well behind. And I would say, Alex, even with like the super shoe thing, you said off the top there that you come to the Nike booth and you're like, we want to talk Alpha Flies, because last year, December 2023, was a buzz at TRE because the Alpha Fly had just made its first appearance in the world, running a world record on Kelvin Kipton's feet in October in Chicago. And they're like, all right, here's what the shoe is, and we're going to release it, and it's coming out in the springtime. None of that this year. So correct me if I'm wrong. There will, at least not in the first half of the year, we're not seeing an Alpha Fly 4.
Not in the first half of the year. I heard some rumors that we might see something in late 2025 or even early 2026. To Nike's credit, with respect, I think it's fine. We've talked about this at a previous podcast. Shoes now take about 2 years to develop for some reason. If you look at Adidas, there were 2 years between their Pro 3 and the now impending Pro 4. That's becoming somewhat industry standard. That's fine. And, you know, when you look at the two world records right now, the men's and women's world marathon records have been run in Alpha Fly 3. So there's a case to be made that they still have the best shoe. But yes, there's a hype hole. And there was a hype hole inside of that Nike booth this year, where if last year they were the big dogs on campus, this year they felt like somewhat of an afterthought compared to On showing off its robot weaved shoe, and then Adidas attracting a lot of interest around the Pro 4 that was coming out, and then a few other cool little training shoes. So to me, that was still missing.
Yeah. Okay. So just to sort of sum this all up, we got a video on the YouTube channel. It dropped. Well, we're recording this segment on Tuesday. Podcast comes out Thursday. in the future, which will be in the past for you, the listener, the video is on our YouTube channel. It's tentatively called Big Changes Coming from Nike in 2025. It sort of unpacks all of this and a little bit more. And I'm really curious to see how they do in 2025. I'm curious to see if they can finally get a little sticky with the running community, because when it comes to everyday trainers, because one of the things I note in the video is you go for a run on your typical running route and you look at what's on people's feet, and it's Asics, it's Brooks, it's New Balance, it's a smattering of On, some Saucony still out there.
Hoka.
Very little Adidas. Hoka for sure.
Hoka, yeah.
Lots of Hoka. Not a lot of Nike. Not a lot of Nike everyday trainers out there. So I'm curious to see if this changes in 2025, if they have any traction. And one other thing to note that I go into some detail on in the video is it sounds like they've come crawling back to indie retailers. So like your local running shop will get a crack at carrying Nike, and whether you knew this or not beforehand. Last couple of years, Nike has basically shut the door on indie running stores and said like, no, all but a few are only going to get select shoes, usually just like the super shoes, the high ticket item, but everyday trainers, everything else has to go through our online shop. We're selling direct. We're not selling through Fleet Feet or other small indie retailers around the United States or Canada or the UK. So that's going to be a big change in 2025 as well. Looking forward to seeing what happens to the Swoosh in the next 12 months. And certainly when we hear more about a super shoe, we'll definitely be talking about it. All right, let's take a break. Be right back. All right, and we're back. Little curveball for you guys before we get into how to run in the wintertime. I've been meaning to ask this of you. We had this in the show notes for the previous podcast. The previous episode, we did a mailbag episode. We answered all of the listener, viewer questions, and I wrote into the show notes that we would have the opportunity to ask each other like an AMA, like an ask me anything type question to each of us. And then we just got totally carried away with the million questions that were asked and went on way too long. And it was a super long podcast. So we didn't get there.
It was fun though.
It was super fun. Yeah. And I'll let's just tuck it in right now.
Okay.
Before we get into the winter running, Sear, ask Katelyn anything.
Oh, God.
Anything. This feels like it's descending into a game of truth or dare.
Yeah.
Yes. Because we're not all physically in the same place, I guess it has to be truth. Truth for Katelyn. Okay. Katelyn, have you ever broken the law?
That was going to be one of my questions.
Oh,
have you
get
ever
out.
committed a felony?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, my question is so boring. Okay, fine. Okay, sorry. I was not thinking of this kind of question. I went running based. Okay.
Katelyn,
I sense you're stalling. Do you have a secret that you're...
What are you hiding from us, Katelyn?
No, I have... Guys, come on. You know me. You know me so well. Have I ever broken
drives
the law?
You drive a Camaro. You're like, you've got a dark side.
Yes, and that Camaro is probably so poorly used because everyone's always like, yeah, put the pedal to the metal, speed. And I'm like, first of all, in Costa Rica, you cannot speed because we don't have, I don't know, open roads. There's traffic everywhere. So I haven't been able to speed with my Camaro. Have I ever broken the law? I wish I could have this amazing backstory about me breaking the law terribly at some point in my life, but I don't think I have. You know, my brother's a police officer. And so when I was living in Boston, it was also always kind of like, oh, that's Matt Tossi's sister. And I'm like, so I have to I'm going to tell my brother he has to listen to the podcast because I threw him out there. Yeah, so I think that I have been pretty vanilla in that sense and not broken the law because I kind of had a little more pressure on me. I don't know what I would have done, but a little more pressure on me because my brother's a police officer, guys. I had to watch it.
Fair enough.
Michael, have you broken? I need to know this. Has Michael?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Have I broken the law in little and medium-sized ways? You know, I mean, there's breaking the law, and then there's breaking the law, and I like to think of myself as a moral and ethical person. I know the difference between right and wrong, and wouldn't cross that line. But when I was younger,
you stole a TV from Costco. Is that what you're gonna say?
It's like,
no, shoplifting.
No. I when I was younger, living in Montreal, I mean, I was not. So graffiti culture was sort of big in the late 90s, early 2000s in Montreal. Dabbled in that a little bit with a few people. Okay. So some trespassing, some vandalism, if you would call it. We called it art. Like on train yards or on like the sides of buildings. Did some really stupid stuff at that point. Like I'm afraid of heights, but I like climbing up on old buildings, several stories up on their old fire. You know, you look at a building and you see the old like rickety fire escape ladder, and you're like, that can't possibly be safe. Well, I'm here to report to you that many of those old ladders are not terribly safe. And yeah, did all kinds of crazy stuff when I was a kid. Stuff like that, like misdemeanor charges, no prison time. I've never done anything terribly wrong in my life, I don't think. Now you get mad. Now you're making me nervous. Now I'm like, what have I done?
Yeah,
what is my dark?
Thinking back, like reflecting, like I don't know.
What is my dark secret?
A couple times, but I don't have anything big. Sorry, Alex, we don't have the really interesting answers for you there.
Well, I suppose that's good, right? That's
yeah.
It means you're high character people. I feel like I have the worst rap sheet of all, to be honest.
Oh, what have you done? Share with us.
Well, my career as a criminal spans decades.
Since the Boston Marathon onesie.
Nearly 3 decades.
Nearly 3. I downloaded music illegally when I was 11.
Oh, come on. That's not.
Hey.
When I was 11.
Napster and LimeWire user.
LimeWire. I was a LimeWire user. It was a thrill. It was a precedent for what was to come. Only 2 years ago, maybe 15 years after the initial transgression, I found myself at a grocery store with newly implemented self-checkout aisles, and I bought a salmon that was on sale. And when the salmon's on sale, they tack in an extra little barcode so that you can scan that one so that you pay $2 less, $12 instead of $14. So I tried to scan that other code, and it said, please wait for attendant. And I was waiting for the attendant, and the attendant never came. So I just took the salmon and I went home. And so
scandalous.
Yeah, I stole salmon.
And he ran a 3-minute kilometer. And
I walked. Up. There was nobody there, and I think a lot of people might have been doing the same thing. Now they've bolstered their security because I think they're trying to limit the delinquent activity like that.
He shoplifted a salmon.
I shoplifted a salmon.
Very, very Maritimes of you. Except for the stealing part, but yeah. To bring this back to running, I would say almost every single runner, if you've been running long enough, you've committed a misdemeanor crime.
Like jaywalking. You mean?
Jaywalking.
Well, there's jaywalking. Sure. That's one, but the public bathroom break is illegal. You can't use the bathroom in public.
Yeah,
that's right. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. If you run long enough, you're going to end up in a situation at some point.
Yeah.
You're right.
It's been a few episodes since we talked about poop, but there we go. Or just number one, just that's still, I mean, technically I think that would be a crime. So
what's the crime? Is it like public nudity? No.
Indecency?
Public indecency.
Yes, I think so. Yes. I'm not really sure. We have to look at the criminal code now.
Let's not find
various states.
I'm going to get Maddie on the phone. We're going to ask
There
him.
You go. There you go. Maddie from Southie. No, he's from Newton. So
no, we're from Newton, yeah.
There you go. Okay. let's pivot back into the core subject of today's pod. How to run in winter running challenges. Okay, so right off the top here, let's regale each other with some of the basic challenges of running in winter. I think for me, number one has got to be footing related. That's the number one challenge. I think running in the cold, the wind, the snow, the sleet, the freezing rain, yeah, that sucks, but it's doable. But it's footing. That's the real core issue for me with winter running. What do you guys think?
For me, maybe it's just because I haven't run that much on snow and ice, but when I do go up to Boston and visit, I still run a lot outside in the winter. And what kills me is the breathing. Let's circle back to Katelyn being a mouth breather again, as I have not which I have not fixed. And so I breathe really hard and I feel like my chest, like my lungs, that really starts to burn if it's really cold out. So like that dry, cold air, I feel like that's my biggest challenge because it'll affect me pretty badly. Like it's not so much the temperature, like you're saying, it's not so much the wind. It's more that breathing in that freezing cold air.
Mm-hmm. I deal with both of those things, and then it becomes a question of should I run on the treadmill or should I run outside to get the best quality? But I'd say my biggest challenge is somewhat niche, and I don't think my ancestors evolved to be winter runners because I have these weird like body problems in the winter. Two of them specifically. One is I get bad nosebleeds for the first.
Really?
Yeah,
so
like
dry.
I think so.
Dry
yeah, when the seasons change, and especially when we go from fall to winter. For the first week or 2 weeks, I can't go through one run without getting a nosebleed. And it's brutal because if it happens mid-run, well, you have to stop and wait for it to be done.
Right.
So the remedy to that, I've learned only this year, and this has been helping. It's not glamorous and it's kind of gross, but you take a Q-tip and you put Vaseline up your nose.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's better than bloodletting, which is, what I thought you were going to say. It's like,
yeah, good. God, no. Yeah. And I mean, after a while, nosebleeds are so bad, you want to limit like the amount of blood that you're losing. So, I do recommend the Vaseline. And the other thing is I get rashes. It's eczema or eczema, depending on which part of the country you're from. When air gets dry, for some people, it tends to get worse. And same things like body cream, body lotion gets rid of it.
Yeah. And in terms of the footing thing, we should say with each of these dilemmas, we will provide an answer. And we'll go through some of the sort of more detailed stuff about like gear you should wear, other training strategies so that you can kind of maximize less than ideal conditions. You're going to face this in the winter time. You're also going to face this in the summertime with extreme heat, right? And for the three of us who are, pretty seasoned lifer runners, we've gone through all this stuff. So yeah, for me, I do a lot of running at our family cottage and now at the ski hill area where I spend or will be spending every single weekend because my kid is in the ski program. And it's in a snow belt. It's in a crazy snowy part of Canada that's beautiful in the wintertime. It's kind of leaning into the winter as much as possible. But there's like 2 feet of snow all the time. And it's farm roads, so they don't plow them really. They just drive over them. It's very hard to run. It's slick. It's that slick, packed down, like many layers of snow packed on top of itself that like, if you live in a winter environment, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like this sort of like slick, white snow ice. That is the worst, besides black ice, the worst possible thing to run on. And I would say my resolution for that, my fix, has been one of 2 things. Either get yourself a really damn good treadmill, Wahoo Kicker Run. Can I recommend
would you suggest? I was going to ask.
Yes, the Wahoo Kicker Run, for example. Or you get a pair of trail shoes with Vibram soles. Is it Vibram?
I've heard all of it. I don't know.
So anyone.
Yes.
Let's go Vibram. It's sort of the happy middle one. It's like the English guy trying to say the French word. And the Vibram Sole is a pretty tacky and sticky and grabby. And you get something with a little bit of a lug. I, for example, this shoe does not have a Vibram sole, but I bought a pair of just like Trail Pegasus, Nike Trail Pegasus, for just this purpose. More for running in the city, because the city things clean up pretty quickly. But sometimes you'll get that day where like the snow removal crews have not gone through the neighborhoods yet. You got to battle some crappy conditions.
And Michael, when you're on those snowy trails near the ski cottage, have you ever tried any of those? I haven't. Any of those traction devices?
Like
Yak
tracks.
Yeah, the Yak tracks.
They work really well, but they're really kind of like weird on your feet. So it's like, if you know that the entire run is going to be slick through and through, and you're not going to hit any bald asphalt at any point, they're great because they're going to dig in and they're going to work for you.
Okay.
Conversely, you can like do a total pivot and get like, there is such thing as competitive snowshoes. Do you guys know this?
No.
There's like performance snowshoes. So you think of snowshoes, you think of like those big giant like
racket things.
Old timey wooden rackets. Yeah, exactly. It looks like a tennis rackets on your feet or whatever. Modern ultralight snowshoes made out of either aluminum or like super light materials like composite or even titanium. They're very light on your feet. They've got a very small profile, and you just like wear a pair of trail shoes and then put those on top, and there you go. And you can get a crazy ass workout in those. You can like, you think running's hard, try running with some snowshoes strapped to your feet. You can do that. That's one way of doing things. I got a pair. They're pretty fun. I got 2 pairs actually. They're pretty fun. The other thing here is wind, and that's what you were talking about, Katelyn. In Toronto, where we live, Alex, you know it. There's that evil westerly wind just waiting for you if you do an out and back on the lake. On the lake shore, you run one direction, then you got to pay the price all the way back. The prevailing wind blows from the west to the east. It's like a total punch in the face. It's awful.
Yeah,
awful.
Yep, I'm facing it today. I have it's
waiting for me this evening.
Yeah, well, I have a remedy for that. And some people call it soft. Other people may call it wily. Do your warm up. Do your easy part. The easy part of your run into the wind. Suck it up and just run easy. Don't think about your pace on your warm up because it doesn't matter anyway. And then benefit from the tailwind on your workout. And the reason I think that works is like you're not suffering. You're not really losing much. You're still able to like hold a good running form when you have the tailwind. The problem is if you're always working out into the wind, you're working much harder than you should be.
Yep.
You're probably still thinking about pace. And so you're going twice as hard. It's just a recipe to burn yourself out. So I'm like a big tailwind guy. Figure it out if you can.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Tailwind guy.
Tailwind guy. Michael, you should put that as his nameplate. In Costa Rica, I know I mentioned in the previous podcast that we're getting into our dry season. So the dry season is absolutely gorgeous because it's sunny. It's like in the 70s. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. Goldilocks, just right. But there's a wind. There's a breeze that comes along with this weather. And for December, January, and February, you are running into the wind half the time. So it's the same sort of idea. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So it's good weather in a sense to train for Boston, but I'm going to be fighting the wind in my face the whole time. And it's not that easy to plan exactly where it is. And I say the same thing, like just don't fight the wind and don't try to hit your paces because you just burn yourself out for the whole rest of the long run if you do that.
This is a great segue into training strategies. Okay, so wintertime training strategies. How do you approach this madness, especially if you're training for like a spring race? You got to run through the winter. You got to do the hardcore months, January, certainly January, February, March, going to be tough. If you're starting right now and you're starting in December, you're just sort of going through the whole gamut, right? And so I would say first tip would be prepared to adjust your workouts. Coach Katelyn.
Yep. You've got to, there are a bunch of different things you can do. One, take a look at the weather forecast for the week. And if you need to shift some things around because you're going to have better weather on some days than you will on the others, then make sure that you make smart decisions. Don't bunch all the workouts up together, of course, or have your coach help you if you have a coach, and they can rearrange the week and say, okay, Saturday is going to be, it's going to snow, it's going to be 0 degrees, but on Sunday it's going to be, I don't know, 10 degrees, 5 degrees Celsius or whatever it is. So I'm going to switch my long run to the warmer day to the sunnier day. So that's one thing you can do. Switch workouts around depending on the weather. Another thing you can do is, play around with the actual workout. And as we just mentioned, Alex and I, about the wind, don't think about pace, but think about effort. So if you have to do threshold intervals, think about your threshold effort and don't think about your threshold pace. So especially if the footing's tough, if you're running into the wind, if there are icy conditions, you have to slow it down anyway. So I would say, don't beat yourself up if you have to slow the intervals down. And if this is something that's going to be reoccurring throughout the season, I guess the best thing to do would be to take those key workouts, the days where you really want to run and need to run fast, and take them indoors. So you have to be flexible with your training strategy. You have to say, if I have to do a threshold workout and I don't want to keep getting mixed up with the bad weather and bad footing and not be able to run my paces, then take it indoors on your Wahoo kicker and do those hard workouts inside.
Yeah. And there's also there is this thought or this belief that maybe you can't really replicate a workout on the treadmill, or it's not the same. This last weekend, I was at the Canadian Cross Country Championships, and I spoke to a friend of mine who's also a very accomplished marathoner. His name's Phil Migas from Canada. So shout out to Phil. And he dropped a 2:15 marathon last year. I think it was last year at the Houston Marathon. So that's the scenario. You're in Canada, you're training in the winter for 2 months. He said he did a lot of treadmill running. Mm-hmm. The one little thing he did on the treadmill was increase the incline by 0.5, just to simulate the type of ups and downs, or I guess slight up that you might have on a road, just make things a little bit more difficult for you. Because when you think about it on a treadmill, you're not hitting hills at all. Mm-hmm. So that gave me some faith in, feeling totally fine with taking a workout indoors. The other thing I'll say when forecasting workouts is we're talking weather here. There's also something else that I think affects you in the wintertime, and perhaps depending on your religion, but I think most people by the end of December are spending a lot of time with family, right? It's holidays for the majority of people. And so you also have to forecast for those social moments. There are two mistakes that I think people make. One is that they let that social completely derail their running. Don't recommend that. Try to fit in your running with your social. But also some people will make the opposite mistake, right? Of letting their running dictate everything that's happening throughout the holiday break. I think you need to be pretty systematic about that. That's what I try to do going into, say, it's like Christmas week, right? You have dinner with one side of the family, dinner with the other side of the family 2 days later. You have whatever, religious celebration, whatever you're into. Try to finagle your running week around that so that neither side really loses out. And that's hard to do because, you're also managing the weather. But I think it's worth spending, a good half hour at the start of the week looking at what's coming and really trying to be strategic about your planning.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, in my group WhatsApp with the guys that I run with, throughout the winter, the conversation at the beginning of the week is always like, well, what's the weekend going to look like for the long run? We do our workouts on Thursday nights. So it's like, what's Thursday night's weather forecast? And we'll shift it. And so the way I would recommend doing it is if you're doing sort of a typical 7-day training plan, you're just following the days of the week as your training plan. Some people do these like screwy, 10-day plans and whatever. But if you're just doing the Monday to Sunday type training plan where the long run is either on a Saturday or Sunday, and then your workouts at some point in the middle of the week, it's totally cool to shift that all up a day or shift it back a day. Mm-hmm. So for me with long runs in the wintertime, I do two things. Everything's kind of modular. It's sometimes we just okay, there's going to be a big snowstorm overnight Saturday night. It's going to create the roads will not be clear in time. So we're moving the long run to Saturday. Let's see if we can get everyone online, everyone in the same boat on this. We're all going to do it on Saturday. We're going to meet up on Saturday and run instead. And that sometimes might mean if it's a beefy week deep into the season, we have to move the workout from Thursday to Wednesday. And that's fine, right? You just need to have that flexibility to move the days around. It can be tricky if you've got a really busy lifestyle and you've got a lot of demands outside of running, or move it to the morning instead of the evening or vice versa, that sort of thing. Just be willing to be a bit flexible in that regard. And another thing that we do, which is nerve-wracking when you're training for a spring race, especially something that creeps up on you like the Boston Marathon, which is always sort of hanging out in mid-April waiting for you, just a little earlier than you want it to be. You got to do a lot of crappy winter running, is if there's a long run you're doing and there's just a lot of snow on the ground and there's not great traction. Everyone has a couple of these if you live in especially the northeast of North America. It's like slushy, slippery, black ice, snow, some good footing here and there, but like to make up 20 miles for a long run is a grind. If you've got any pace, like marathon pace or pickups or any sort of like anything spicy and faster, we just drop it. Because if the traction under your feet is not great for 20 miles, you are going to end up at the end of that 20 miles really, really, really ground up, whether you know it or not, because of all, just think about it. Every single step. How many steps do you take in a 20-mile run, right? Like thousands, right? And how many micro slips are there in those thousands of steps compared to a nice, clean summer run? You know, it's crazy. It's like, could be 10, 15, 20% harder amount of work in the long run. So I know like cutting corners is not a great thing and it doesn't sort of breed confidence, but I think you have to sort of start triaging your run where you're like we said before, think about perceived effort. Don't think about time on the watch. Don't obsess over the pace. I know marathon pace is something that builds a lot of confidence, but in that case, you kind of let it go a little bit. That's my recommendation for that. Do you guys run on Christmas Day?
Yeah.
yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course.
That's the one holiday I do not run on. Because remember I told you guys about the run on Christmas Eve, that there's like a 20, on the 24th, the Chanter run that I like to do. So if I do that and I run a 10 miler on Saturday hard, then that's what I do it on purpose so I can take Christmas Day off.
I run on Christmas Day, but I refuse to let my run affect any of the plans. Like morning, it's gifts with the family. There's a lunch, there's a dinner. I fit it in at some point, but if I'm screwing up the plans, then I'm defeating the purpose.
Alex has to see if Santa came for him, you know, especially if he's back in PEI visiting his family, right?
Yep.
Santa always comes.
Oh, there we go.
I'm not obsessed with running on Christmas Day or not running on Christmas Day. I, like you, Alex, I think what I do is if there's a window, I treat it like a Saturday, because I do a long run on a Sunday and then I'll do my shortest run of the week is typically on Saturday, the day before the long run. And I'll do something equivalent to that on Christmas Day, usually sort of sneak out after lunch or mid-morning, kind of in between meals when everyone's just kind of hanging out. My wife and I will go out and run for 40 to 60 minutes, usually. Nothing crazy. Yeah. Another move would be, like you said, take it indoors, Katelyn. But taking it indoors is one thing. You have to have a plan. So either if you live in this frozen hellscape that Alex and I live in, maybe invest in a treadmill. And actually, one of our readers pointed this out. He said, or listeners, readers, that's for the website. One of our listeners pointed this out in one of the comments about the Wahoo Kicker Run treadmill, which is quite expensive. It's $5,000 US. It's a premium product. But he pointed out, like, I'd rather buy a cheaper car and invest in the thing that I really love and care about and want to do every day for the rest of my life, and that's running. It's like, I'd rather just, if you have that flexibility in your life and that financial wherewithal in your life to divert $5,000 to something like a really premium treadmill that you can use in these moments, that's a good thing to do. Or what I did about 10 years ago is I just got myself a cheap gym membership, the cheapest gym membership I could find. And I would go there to do my strength work. And then it was my bailout for a run if it was really snowy.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. So I would just go crush their treadmills. And I developed a very strange relationship with the people that work there because they're like, oh, the weird guy in the short shorts is back to run for 3 hours on the treadmill again. Yeah. Watch an entire NFL game on a Sunday afternoon. Oh, there's my other tip. Not only do you shift around your days, around snow days, but consider, if you can, moving your run to the middle of the day. Now, especially a long run, it's trickier in the middle of the day because you've eaten into some of your energy stores already if you're getting to noon and then you're going for your long run. But in the dead of winter, it's the warmest point of the day. It's when you're going to get the most sunlight. Like, just run at 12 o'clock, run a 1 p.m. long run. I mean, it's a little grittier and harder, but it's not a bad idea. I've done it from time to time.
Yeah, thinking about the warmest part of the day, I think is a really good tip if you have the flexibility. And like you're saying, maybe someone will only have the flexibility on a weekend or a long run, but try to think when that would be. Because I know if it got cold here in the winter, I would be in some trouble because I really like to do my runs first thing in the morning. And it is dark. And you need to be not only careful of that, which is another thing we can get into about, safety on the roads, not just the footing, but you have less daylight hours, usually depending on where you live in the world. But if we're talking about, in the northeast of North America, we're talking about shorter days. And so now the sun isn't coming up nice and early and it's not setting nice and late. You have a reduced amount of sunlight for you to be able to, one, be warmer, as Michael mentioned, and two, be seen and to be able to see very well without needing to carry a flashlight or a headlamp or anything like that. So I think, it's tricky because you have to have a flexible schedule to be able to do that. But when you can, it would be the safest choice for you.
When is it too cold to run outside? I think that's a burning question for a lot of people. And it's a question I'm sure the three of us, Alex, you and I in particular, have had many instances where you're 20 minutes into the run, you're still really cold. You're finding the air difficult to breathe. You're sensing some icicles forming around your ears, literally.
Oh, no.
And you're like, maybe this is actually too cold. What am I doing? When is too cold to run? Is there such a thing?
There is such a thing.
There is definitely such a thing. But yes.
I'd say for the breathing. I'd say when your breathing is off and you feel like you can't pick it up because you can't suck in oxygen quickly enough, then that's probably your indicator that you should try to run inside if you can. I think you can make a lot of wardrobe mistakes that eventually you can correct just by getting the right gear. And so if you are living in a cold place, it might be your responsibility to gear up properly, but you can't really change your esophagus or your lungs. And so if your lungs can't take the breathing, well, that's your cue.
Yeah, I would say that's really important, having the correct gear and the layering, and we can get into all of that in a second. But I kind of nerded out a little bit here, guys. That's usually not my stance, but I did. And the American College of Sports Medicine actually does have a parameter for too cold, and it seems way too cold for me, but it says that when you're at negative 18 Fahrenheit, which is negative 27 Celsius.
Yep.
At this point, wouldn't you say? At this point, you're talking about, okay, frostbite and hypothermia become significant risks. Of course, we're not going to go out running in that weather, but just to actually find that data, it is out there. But I think that we're going to call it quits way before that, because now you're talking about, risks with a tissue injury and just, soon into the run. So of course, we're not thinking about going out in that weather, but it's just to kind of give that piece of data that's out there.
So that's negative 18 Fahrenheit.
Mm-hmm. And I have to be honest.
27 Celsius.
I went out once when I was visiting my dad in winter, and my husband said I was crazy. He said I was crazy. I really, really bundled up. And I remember seeing that it was like minus 12 Fahrenheit or something like that, minus 10 Fahrenheit. And I was like, no, but I can do this. And so just to know that I'm sure that you guys have also gone out in pretty cold weather and you've braved it with the correct layering and the correct gear. So I mean, you could probably get on that, but that's just above and beyond. Way
It's
too
just
cold.
it's just not fun.
It's just not fun. Yeah, you're not going to enjoy that whatsoever. So of course, be careful and make the decision on your own. But just wanted to throw out that little tidbit that I found.
All right, to that, what's our secret hacks, our pro tips for gear? What's the must-have pieces? Alex, what's your we each of us veteran winter runners, we've got our little kind of like, it's almost like a little secret. You're like, oh, I always wear this or that, or you go with this instead of that, or here's something to really focus on. What are your your core items that are like can't live without in running in the wintertime?
So Under Armour has been surpassed by most brands in most areas, but they remain the top brand at making Under Armour, literal undergarments. Okay,
you're right. You are right.
They're still
yes,
the best.
I have some of this stuff too. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It tights, just and also the top layer. They're
the base layer,
thick base layers are amazing. They work the best for me. Those are my go-tos. And then as a top jacket, there's a jacket by On that I really like. It's called the Climate Jacket, and it's just like, it's lightweight, but it's also bubbly. It's like a bubble jacket, a lot of down in there, and yeah, it's just like the best ratio between like lightness and also warmth. So it's like Under Armour base layer, On Climate Jacket. I can take on anything.
Nice.
I would say that really key items. One, my hands get cold first. When you think about it, your extremities are basically your like, especially your hands are your thermometer, right? It's like the way you can, it's the way you sort of like your fingers and hands, and then also your around your face area, kind of like help you thermally regulate, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need to keep my hands warm, and my hands are the first thing to get cold. I have like dainty hands. Like my hands get cold, and I hate having cold hands. So I'm like a double glove guy. And so my move, first of all, running gloves are trash. Full stop. Mm-hmm. I've never, ever owned a pair of running gloves that actually did their job in winter. Like winter running gloves feels like they're all designed in California. They are not good at what they do. So what I do is I either will have like a pair of, like running gloves that I've been gifted or received over the years, or reluctantly purchased, that are more like they're more of a shoulder season glove. And then I'll get mitt covers. The North Face used to make, I'm not sure if they still do anymore, these really nice sort of like wind stopping mitt covers. They're just like a wind stopper material. They're just little covers that go over their mitts, and it keeps your hands warm. Or I'll just like buy straight up like Gore-Tex ski mitts. Cross-country ski gear is where it's at. I run in, my winter hats are all by this cross-country skiing company called Swix, SWIX. Stuff is amazing. Their gloves, their mitts, their hats, they're designed for cross-country skiing, right? So they are excellent. I would also give a gigantic shout out to a recent item that I acquired at the running event, guys. Had a little meeting with.
I know what it is.
Yeah, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I was like wearing it around proudly, even though I didn't need to wear it because it was like 72 degrees in Austin. The Concurve Gore-Tex jacket by Gorewear. Gorewear is this subdivision of the overall Gore-Tex company. We all know Gore-Tex. Gorewear is their like running and cycling sub-brand, and they make this absolutely killer like bomb-proof winter running jacket called the Concurve Gore-Tex jacket. It's sick. It's so good. I've run in it a couple of times now. It's frigging cold right now suddenly where we are, Alex. It's like -7 Celsius. So what is it, 19 degrees? Is that what that is? And
yeah, that's cold.
Fahrenheit? and just nasty wind. And there's just this nasty little sheet of ice on the ground right now too. But the Gorewear Concurve jacket is pretty great. And I own 3 different levels of jacket. I was thinking about this. I'm like, I own a kind of shoulder season light single ply jacket that's more just a windbreaker. I own a step up from that that's a little bit warmer and more serious. I would factor the Boston Marathon jacket in that category. It's actually a fairly warm jacket, pretty good winter running jacket for most conditions. Then you got like the no effing around jacket. You've got this jacket where it's just like, and this is where the Gorewear jacket would come in. It's just, it's going to keep heat in, but it's also going to, the technology allows sweat to evaporate as well. And that's really important to have that. Tights. I think tights are key. There's 1 and 2 ply tights. Did you guys know this? They're not just, there's not just like one type of tight.
Something? No.
Yeah. No, seriously. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Fleece line tights. Nice.
Yeah. And you got to be careful when you're buying your tights because the single ply tights are fine. But when it gets below 0 Celsius, so when it gets below what 32 Fahrenheit, you have to get 2 ply tights. That's another pro tip. Final one. And this one will solve your wind problem, Katelyn.
Okay.
The buff.
A buff.
The buff. Those of you who do not know what a buff is, it's like a neck warmer. Is that what I mean? What is it? It's like a.
It could be used as a neck warmer, a headband,
a headband,
Halloween mask,
handkerchief.
Halloween mask. Exactly. You wear it around your neck. It's relatively thin material, so it doesn't feel too bulky or cumbersome or too overly warm. Keeps your neck warm. Gets really cold. You're running back into the wind. Pull it up over your face. The buff. A key item in your winter running arsenal.
I want to know about socks, guys, because my toes, that's the first thing when I'm up visiting is my feet just go numb. So what are your best recommendations for socks?
I wear cotton socks. I'm not the best person to ask. I wear cotton socks almost year round.
Oh,
it's just a habit I got myself into, but they're not that bad at keeping the toes warm. There are these like super athletic fitting socks that are awesome for the summer that don't double well as winter socks. So listen, man, I take out your cotton socks.
Okay.
Merino wool.
Uh-huh.
Oh, it's
Merino
good one.
wool socks.
Yep.
I've tried every type of sock over the years, and when it gets really cold outside, any like experienced winter runner, you know, those of you listening right now, you know exactly what socks you're going for on a really cold day because you've sort of like figured it out. You're like, those socks. And for me, it's always like a crew merino wool sock. So it goes up above and inside the tight. So a little extra warmth there, sealing everything in. No-show socks because then you got that gap. You got the dangerous ankle gap, which is not a big deal if it's like 0, if it's 32 Fahrenheit, but if it gets below that, you're in trouble. Couple other quick items. Sunglasses. Snow equals refraction of light, and it's actually harder to run on a sunny day in the wintertime than it is in the summertime. Sunglasses and chapstick.
Chapstick. Yes, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Or after Sear pulls the Vaseline Q-tip out of his nose, he
puts it over his lips as well. I also
disgusting.
2 different Q-tips, guys.
I know that I just wanted to mention, and you guys are the absolute experts on cold weather running. But so is it true that the general recommendations should be think about what the temperature is outside and then dress as if it were up 20 degrees warmer or something?
Or 10 Celsius warmer.
10 Celsius warmer, just because you're going to start overheating. Exactly, because you're going to start overheating if you overdress, and that won't be comfortable either.
I think that's like a fairly good rule, actually.
Okay.
That is something that I do sort of think about. So, yeah. Okay. So final one, closing closing up this conversation about the endless winter, what's the stupidest mistake you've made in the wintertime or in a inclement scenario weather-wise?
Mine segues really well from what I just said, and I didn't even mean to. So I can go. I can take this one. I did the stupidest thing. So speaking of overdressing, and this was not running, but I am not great in the cold. Hence one of the reasons I live in Costa Rica. So I went up to visit and we went skiing. And it was going to be really cold. There was no sun. It was icy conditions. It was just one of those really gray, cold, freezing days. And I had on a number of layers that you guys can just not even imagine. I was like walking, like I couldn't even walk with the amount of layers of clothes that I had on. So I'm skiing and I decide to go in for a nice hot drink, and my toes are numb. I'm freezing cold, even with all these layers. Go into the lodge, go up to get something to drink. Don't take anything off. I just left the skis outside, walked in with all of my layers on, didn't unzip a jacket, didn't take off my headband and hats and everything else that I had on. Walked in, starting to feel a little woozy. Okay, yeah, it just must be the cold. Get something to drink, go up to the cashier, pay for it. Whoa, starting to feel real woozy.
Oh,
everything is turning black. And I was by myself and I passed out cold on the floor next to the cashier, just like cold, because I had overheated.
Oh, yikes.
So someone, thank goodness, a good Samaritan like ran up to me. I was like, are you okay? I'm going to get you some water. And I was just like coming to, I don't know how long it was later. It's just one of those like, you pass out and then you wake up pretty soon afterward. And it was just, it must have been that. And that's exactly why you don't want to overdress. Not saying that you're going to pass out, but it was such a dumb thing of me not to think when I came in from 30 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees Fahrenheit, probably because it was really cold, 20 degrees Fahrenheit to 75 degrees, they crank it up in the lodge, that I should have started stripping some of those layers. So I would say that's one of my big tips. That was my biggest failure with cold weather sports.
Oh my God. Yours is way better than mine. Mine is kind of a classic one that when I was about 21, I was in New Brunswick and they were calling for like the storm of the decade. And I still decided to go for a long run, even though the storm had already began. And it was a 90-minute long run. So I remember going with the wind for the first 45, turning around. The storm had intensified. I couldn't see anything. I was on the side of a highway and walked parts of my way home because I couldn't run through the wind and also couldn't see. Thankfully, there were no cars on the highway because it was a storm. But also I felt like I was about to get lost in the wilderness of Eastern Canada.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah, I've had some of those ones. I'm just like, yep, I've been there. Yeah, I would say that like every winter, my wife and I just like, horrify our small child by going out and doing these long runs where we would every weekend we would be out in like middle of nowhere, Ontario, having to run on like old country roads, really cold, really snowy. And because it was just us and our kid, we had to platoon our runs. So like one of us would go out and run 20 miles, and the other would stay back with the kid. And then we'd switch. We'd like tag out. And it would just be like every weekend of like, mom would go out, disappear for 2.5 hours, come back like she'd been lost in a blizzard for a month, like frozen, like the buff, like just all you could see is her eyes because she's got the buff up to her nose, to her eyes, and then the hat's pulled down over multiple hats, like icicles on the side, draping the sides of the hat. Everything's frozen. I have to like pull the buff down off her face because she can't pull it down. Comes inside, collapses on the ground. And it's like, so cold, and it's like, but I got the 20 miles done, and then I'm like, all right, okay, I'm going to go out and do that now too. And then I come back looking like Jack Nicholson in the last shot in The Shining, I'm just like frozen in the maze. And then this is normal for my kid. This is my child's reality watching this. So yeah, we've done that one. That's sort of par for the course at the Doyle household in the wintertime. So that's what we're going to get ourselves into. All right, guys, it's enough of the wintertime. If you got any questions about winter training, any thoughts, comments, obviously add them in on our YouTube channel where we post a video version of this podcast, or on Spotify where they take podcast comments as well. If you're listening on Spotify, make sure to rate and subscribe, rate and review this podcast, share it with a friend. Please do us a great deal of help to connect with runners just like yourselves. And all right, guys, until next week.
Happy running in the cold.
Exactly.
I'm so motivated now. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.